All right, it looks like we have everyone here. Thank you again for coming. This is so exciting. This is another one of our DC Who's Art and Culture events. For those that are returning, welcome back. I love to see familiar faces and see familiar names. And for those that are new to these events, this is our way of just continuing to bring you all this front row seat to some authentic conversations with diverse and creative alumni. My name is Kim Edwards, and I am one of two co-chairs for our DC chapter of the Washington Who's. Tonight's conversation will hopefully give you a good glance and a lens of some healing, wellness, and meaningful conversation. I'd like to welcome the brain power, the creative programmer, and the founder of a wellness tech platform, Ms. Tamara Dottin.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Kim and DC Hughes, for having me. I'm really excited about this.
It's such a pleasure having you. I think that tracking you down and getting you booked was amazing because I think the new platform, the new app is definitely booming. People want to know about it. They want to hear it and use it. So thank you for giving us that time this evening. I think that some of us know a little bit about the background and what you have created, but for those that aren't aware, can you give us a little bit of a summary or explanation of what is this app that you've created?
Definitely, definitely. So Huemon is a wellness platform where people record themselves answering self-reflective, thought-provoking questions. And the overall goal is to help people create a more meaningful connection to both themselves and others. We believe really deeply in the power of storytelling. And through sharing these open and honest anecdotes, we hope to create deeper levels of introspection and empathy, which are skills our world can use now more than ever. So yes, really excited about it. And we're in the early stages, recently launched to a close subset of early signups, and excited to kind of grow from here. So yes, a lot in the future.
Yes, for sure. And I think that you are somewhat on the cutting edge of really optimizing this time where the world is and where this generation is as far as technology is concerned. I think, yeah, social media is huge in all facets, and different platforms of ways to connect with people are always at the forefront of people's minds. And one thing that I will say I personally like about the app is it's not so much like social media where people can hide and create, filters and things like that. People can't wear a mask, kind of figuratively and literally, with your app.
Exactly, and intentionally so. I think a lot of powerful things start to happen when we kind of take off that facade that we feel like we have to put on. It lets us learn more about ourselves when we stand in authenticity and we stand in our truth and we share that with others. And then there's so much learning that can happen when we see others doing that and creating this community where these authentic stories are being shared, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which a lot of other platforms don't allow for. There's a lot of healing and growth that can happen, which is why we wanted to create in this way.
That's amazing. And you mentioned something that kind of triggered another question and the thought. You mentioned that there's other apps, which we all know there are apps that are out there for meditation, for wellness, for different facets and perceptions of what self-care is. I definitely think I want to tease apart the difference and kind of make a distinction between the sphere of mental health and the sphere of wellness and kind of self-care. And where do you feel that your app falls?
Definitely, yeah. There's a wide spectrum of services out there that provide a therapeutic outlet, both offline and online, and in the digital space. And as you mentioned, a lot of different apps, specifically within self-care. And I think one thing that sets Huemon apart is that community or social aspect that we add to it. A lot of the other apps kind of focus more on the solo journey, which is totally very important and key when it comes to self-care. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's so much learning from others, especially others who have shared some of those lived experiences, and so much we can learn and grow and just add to our own perspective and worldview. So I think that's a huge part of it that makes Huemon a little different from some of the other players in the space.
I agree with that. And even the name Huemon, I want to initially say, I felt like that was a really good play on the word and play on the name. And I genuinely, and for those in the audience, I have no idea where she came up with I wanted to maintain the authenticity. And when I saw it and I heard a little bit about it, I didn't know exactly where your vision was. I just knew that the name Huemon reminded me of human, of course, and the explanation of transparency, authenticity, taking that layer off and getting to know the actual person. But then I also thought about hue and the spelling and the understanding of it's a virtue of color, so to speak. And we discern light, of course, in different ways, and people in different ways. And I think about that intersectionality between what you see on the outside and what you see underneath once you kind of dig in and get to know someone. If you can answer the question, how did you determine or come up with the name for your platform?
Definitely. Well, I love that explanation. So I might be stealing that, Kim. I'm going to write that down. But yes, as you mentioned, it's a play off of the word human. And I think just bringing together those human and real human experiences. And then also, yes, as you break the name down, hue, the different colors coming together, different political hues, all of those unique factors that make us special and coming together as one. So mon, mostly when used as a preface or prefix, is monorail or monolith, is kind of that all of these things coming together as one. And so that was the motivation for the name Huemon.
I love that. I love that. And we're on the same wavelength. Like I just felt it. The vibes were there. I understood.
I'm glad that comes across. I'm glad that's clear.
It does. It does. And even from different realms, which later this evening we'll dig into more of the scientific and the data aspect. But I think about the personal aspect and the colors that you use, the ease. It is very user friendly, so to speak. It's a consumable product. And I wanted to know exactly who is your target audience? I don't want to assume it's for the generation that uses apps and, you know, it's on technology, but I want to hear from you, the creator. Who do you want to use your product?
Definitely. So as we're starting out, and again, in those early phases and very targeted, our target user is a person going through a specific point in their life when there might be a lot of flux, a lot of change, maybe the end of a relationship, a change in dynamic in a relationship. Maybe they're starting a new job and they feel like they haven't kind of gotten into their flow of things. There's just this period where that foundation feels like it's shaking and they need a space to offboard or unpack and offload. And when they do so, they want to feel validated in the fact that they're not alone. They're not crazy in how they feel. They're sharing in a larger human experience. And so that is who we are focusing on as we're starting. And really that pain point that we're trying to solve is that, you know, you can have lots of people around and lots of relationships and still not feel heard. So we want to create a space where people really feel like they can share and feel heard and not feel like they're either dismissed or judged or receive maybe pity or any, you know, get over it or you'll be all right, that kind of reaction. We wanted to create a space that was really where people can share and see others who are going through those same experiences and grow from that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And it really makes me think that the next segment where if you don't mind, I would love to share a video of some of those experiences, because I think that there's one thing to hear someone say, oh, I told my story. I think to hear someone else tell someone else's story, you know, you have different levels of interpretation now, you have a different voice, so to speak. So I really like that you capture the authenticity of that individual telling their own story and allowing whomever would like to hear it to be able to watch it and view it on their own terms when they're ready. So I like that, and I want to share that, if you don't mind.
Sure thing, yes.
What advice would I give
to your 16-year-old self?
My support system during the pandemic.
First time I felt like an outsider.
The last time I cried.
I actually cry pretty often. It's a little embarrassing.
My kids were watching me and like kind of looking at me like,
I believe I may have heard a song or listened to some music that reminded me of my mom, and the tears started to flow.
Thinking about the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the state of our nation, climate change, I just let myself cry.
I would tell my 16-year-old self
to learn how to set healthy boundaries with the people that you love.
Stay away from the guys.
The road to success is paved with negative feedback.
I think this is one reason I became an anthropologist, or feeling like an outsider.
Therefore, stop and smell the roses. You're only 16 once, enjoy it.
Dance as often as possible.
Friendships are important.
I guess I had some tears that needed to come out.
I think in the end, we all kind of feel the same. We feel uncertain about sharing our vulnerability. And if we did, I think it actually would make things a lot easier.
And overall, you are so, so loved.
I just want to take a moment to really absorb that. That openness and connection and vulnerability, I think, was truly captured in those videos. And it's exciting to know that there is an outlet. There is a place that people can go to really share their experiences. And I also think about people that during this current time, maybe still stuck at home, right? Even though, you know, depending on where you are geographically, things have been lifted, things have been opened, times are changing, but it's not the same as it was before. Those outlets are no longer there. And if they are, they've changed or shifted.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I really would like to hear from you as far as what do you want people to take away when they see your app, when they see this opportunity? What do you want them to get from it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the takeaway, a lot of these experiences can be very isolating, either physically because we are at home by ourselves, but even emotionally, just these periods we can feel disconnected to ourselves or how we see ourselves or used to see ourselves. And then also disconnected with others. We might still have those daily talks or those check-ins, but there might just feel like we're not connecting like we used to, or we're not feeling seen. And so I want people to come away from the platform feeling heard, seen, and validated. That is the first and foremost the thing. And then also to know that they share in some of those experiences with others. They're not alone in this. And my hope is also by keeping it very authentic and keeping it very visual with the video format, we can now start to kind of change how we see others. A lot of our interactions, especially when they're only taking place on Zoom for 15 minutes at a time, we kind of forget that this person is coming to that interaction with all of this background, what they went through that morning, what their family might be struggling through, what may be, going on in their relationships, and just have more of an understanding and acceptance for that, and meaning people as a whole, and not just the one side that we get to see of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if I can reiterate what you already stated, being heard, seen, and validated are three components to one's wholeness and their sense of self that I think you've really captured a way to not only identify that, but preserve it so that not only others benefit, but they can also benefit by seeing their own videos. That one individual said that she had cried numerous times, and that's a real feeling that people have. I think that your app, to go to a little bit more of the technical side and make a shift, is, like I said earlier, it's very intuitive. It's clear that you've created systems, and there's no doubt that the programming is well thought out. But in this time of what you call maybe a TikTok generation, that kind of wants those micro bites of information. How are you able to bring people in to really connect and make some of those and kind of engaging moments and spaces?
Yeah, well, that's definitely the challenge, and just our attention spans as a whole are difficult. So just with the current version of the app where it is, we definitely want to emphasize that bite-sized nature of it and make it a little more digestible. Wellness as a whole, because that whole wellness journey can be really daunting to somebody who's trying to take it on for the first time. But if we can kind of boil it down to just, hey, reflect on this that happened in your life. You know, you don't have to prepare too much. You just have to kind of think back, like, how did I feel? What happened? And we do 1-minute recordings, both to help people kind of just get it out there and in an easier way, and also to make it very consumable for others on the platform. And so we're definitely looking at new features and new ways to kind of share these stories. Video can be difficult sometimes, especially, you know, our hair's not done and we're not ready for the camera. So we're looking into what options we can build around that. But definitely what we can do to preserve that intimacy and the authentic nature. On a lot of other platforms, we could easily hide behind like an avatar or some text, and we want to make sure that this is not the space where that's happening. This is the space for, you know, real stories. And openness and honesty and everything.
I like that. What you said earlier, that it's consumable. You're right. That 1 minute, that's realistic. People can handle that. And also on the giving end, to create something and to be vulnerable for 1 minute it's somewhat doable. It's feasible, right? You might have to have more than one take, and that's okay.
And we allow for that. We understand. Exactly. But we really want to keep the realness of these, because I think that's what connects with others more so. And what the stories that affect me aren't necessarily the polished ones or the ones that are best delivered, but the ones where I could, oh yeah, I experienced that, or I went through that. I've been there. Yeah. So we want to emphasize that.
I definitely agree with that and appreciate that as a consumer, that you capture what we really want to see, because that's what's relatable, right? You learn from what you can relate to, not what you necessarily feel is unattainable, you know?
Exactly. And I think that is one of the things we were trying to combat, that other platforms, people feel trapped that they can only share the best versions of themselves. They feel some competition and, you know, well, everyone else has this perfect life that they're sharing and stuff. And when things aren't going well, where can I kind of release that? And so, yeah, we wanted to make sure that this was a space that didn't fall into that trap of kind of comparing and that feedback loop that makes you want to only share the good times.
Right. That's very true. And definitely needed, because as you mentioned a couple of times, there are other apps. And I think that we're not naive to think that this is the very first, but I think in the tech industry and in wellness and health, it's not necessarily that same level of competition, right? You're not necessarily trying to be the first, you're not necessarily trying to be the best. You're trying to make sure that you've created something that is benefiting your consumers, and you have your target audience, and you want to not only help them, but continue to help them. So there's no end goal. And I love that you mentioned the feedback piece, that you and everything that you're doing is continuous. You're listening to people, you're hearing what they're saying, and you're acting on it, which you don't always see, especially in the tech world. You don't always see that immediate change when something's not working or it's no longer meeting the needs of those that are using it.
Exactly.
For those that know a little bit about your background, we know that you were working for other companies and specifically working as the senior software engineer at OpenTable, which is fairly familiar to most of us that have probably used it.
Probably not as much right now, but
not so much. But I think about companies like that are knowledgeable, they have the skills, they really have that knack for not only programming, but also knowing how to get consumer buy-in. How did you know when it was time to really separate from a company like that?
Yes. And that is a tough answer. And I think if you ask my parents, they have their opinions on that too. But I think that's a really difficult thing for any entrepreneur to know when is the right time to take that leap and jump in. And obviously you're working on something, maybe nights and weekends on the side, and it's a project that you're passionate about, which in my case, that was the same with Huemon. It was an idea I was kicking around, and then I was testing a little bit here and there. I knew I was ready to take a leap, which happened fairly recently. So during these times, which was another extra layer on that. But definitely when I saw that, like, all my energies, I wanted to invest in Huemon and building it, and just I couldn't commit the way I wanted to in my full-time job at OpenTable, and just with other endeavors. I really felt like at that point I knew, well, this is where my mind is anyways. I need to take that leap, and also did some, planning ahead and financial preparation, because it is not something to be taken lightly. But I do feel sometimes when we're on that professional track, we feel like, oh, I can't have a gap in the resume, or, oh, this will look bad if, it fails or anything. But there is so much learning and growth that happens in pursuing a passion. And even if you fail, I think there's so much, one, that you learn, and then I think that you can offer others in, your future employment or whatever your future endeavors are, that, for me, that made sense to give it a try and give it my all.
Well, I think we're glad that you did. And since we are on this platform that really speaks to authenticity and genuine conversation, I love that you already started talking about some of the challenges, because I definitely want to dig into that. But before we talk about some of the nitty-gritty, so to speak, of the fog and the mystery of what is working for yourself, not only as an entrepreneur, but as an entrepreneur in the tech world, I think about startups. And if I remember correctly, this is not the first time that you have worked with or for a startup. And as someone that's worked with a startup tech company before, it's no small feat by any means. You really have to want to be in the trenches. And from what I understand, this is something that you've chosen to do a couple times now. So my question is, what keeps bringing you back to this startup kind of arena?
Exactly. So yeah, out of college, out of UVA, I did the big companies, the typical DC, like defense contracting and everything like that. And I think I had my own ventures here and there into the startup space, and just kind of building, just kind of playing around in that sandbox. My most relevant, I guess, startup experience was with a company called Venga in the DC area. And I joined when it was 3 of us as engineers, and got to see that through to acquisition, which happened in 2019 when we were acquired by Booking Holdings and the OpenTable family. And that's when I transitioned into there. And just, that was such a great experience, being on such a small, intimate team, and you just really become so close to the product. At larger companies, I would work on features, and you're developing and you're making it work, and then you kind of ship it. And, depending on where you are, you might see how the client is using it or what they're getting from it, and or you might not. I think in the startup space, you really get that intimacy with the product and with the customer and the problem that you're solving. And for me, that's always just been so much more interesting, just working on a new feature for, some platform that I don't even kind of understand the all of. And then I just have always been very passionate about entrepreneurship and just solving problems and solving real human problems. And I think in the startup world, even if it's not your own startup, you're working very closely with the founders usually, or at least the founding team. And so you get that rich history, and you get to see them problem solve in real time, and you get to contribute to some of that. And it's just so much positive energy for me, at least, which is why I wanted to stay in this space. And which is why I knew I wanted to pursue even my own project in that way.
Yeah. Would you say it's a fair statement that it's kind of your niche in the tech industry and the engineering world?
It is quickly becoming so. So yes, I'm going to own it. I'm going to say today that is
where we are today. I think it's a safe assumption that this is what you'll be doing for at least a little while.
Exactly.
Earlier, we spoke to some of the challenges, and we mentioned that there are things that aren't beautiful, we know, in any industry, let alone it being tech and the culmination of tech and human, right? Human aspects, that self-care, wellness, things that change. I want to talk about these challenges a little bit more and dive into what was a challenge in helping to create or creating your own tech venture, but more specifically, as an African American female. And before you answer that question, I know that it's a question you've been asked before, you've been interviewed before. Can you answer that question in a way that you haven't answered on other platforms?
Yes. So definitely as a Black woman in the tech space through my classes and my coursework, there was definitely that feeling of being an other. And with that, especially in I feel a high pressure field. And when you're working with really smart people, a lot of times that otherness can lead to some imposter syndrome and like, oh, if I'm not performing, that means I don't belong here because I look around and I don't see a lot of others that look like me. So that's always been a challenge through education, through my career, definitely earlier. I could think back to times when it affected my growth and how much I tried and kind of put myself out there. But it's definitely been something, now that I'm able to reflect 10 years of experience and everything, it's definitely something that I've grown with, and something that helps me connect with others who might not even feel like an other in this space. So white males who feel like, oh, they can't cut it, or they're not good enough, they're not smart enough. And even I have that conversation on imposter syndrome, and sometimes it's the first time they're hearing it, but it allows me to connect with them and be more comfortable and learn from them, and them learn from me also. And I think a lot of that plays into what I wanted to create with Huemon as well, kind of sharing those more vulnerable moments, because it can be really great times of learning. So I think also with jumping into the startup space, again, especially tech startup space, it's not a space where you see a lot of other Black women or women of color. And it's growing and it's changing slowly. But I think that is always challenging when you kind of look around and feeling like you kind of have the weight of what you're trying to build and still uncertain about on your shoulders, but also, you feel like you're kind of carrying the weight of your community and you want to, represent well. I think that's a lot of something we can all kind of identify. So that's always been a challenge. And especially that feeling alone. And so one thing I've done to try to address that is seek out relationships, seek out other people who are building. I joined a fellowship for entrepreneurs, which has been super helpful. Just getting to talk to somebody and somebody else who says, I get it. Yeah, I'm struggling too. And this is what I did. It goes a really long way.
That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for that. As I was careful with that question because I didn't want to repeat what you've already said to other people. But I think that with this platform and our relationship, it's a question that those that are listening and watching would want to know the real answer to. And especially those that have already lived some of that life, like you said, that other, or had similar experiences where the imposter syndrome, as you said, comes into play, because that is a reality of people of color, of people that are not in the immediate majority at their workspace. And you found a way to not only get past that, but to really thrive on what you learned from that experience and creating your own platform.
Exactly. And use it to my benefit if I can. There's so much that I've learned from that experience that maybe others haven't. And so
exactly,
how can I leverage that?
Yes, and leverage is a great aspect to growth and development. And you mentioned a mentor in some sort of way, where it kind of goes into my next thought of, now that you are an accomplished software engineer, thinking back, you mentioned UVA and your time on grounds. You, I'm sure, obviously were in the e-school, a member of NSBE. Was there a moment in college that somewhat solidified this avenue for you that, even if you're in those classes of, 100 people, 200, and understanding that there's no one else that looks like me in this space, or going on an internship and being the only one that looks like you, that sounds like you? What was it that made you say, I still want to do this?
Yeah. So I would actually say there were two that stand out in my mind. One early on in my first year, I did not know that I wanted to do computer programming or computer science or anything. I had never done it in high school. I was just in the engineering school because I always liked maths and science. So I had to take CS 101 because you have to take a course in each of the engineering disciplines. And it was our final project, and I think I was up at 1 a.m. working on it in stacks, for those who are familiar with this e-school. And I finally got something working, and it was really simple, easy, probably just like a print something to the screen, but like just getting that was so motivating, and like thought to myself, oh, this clicks, like this actually, I can do this. And so that's what motivated me to, pursue computer science. And then coming on to the end of my time at UVA, I still didn't know what I wanted to do with that afterwards. Did I want to be a developer, a software engineer? Or did I want to stay in that space at all? And I had the benefit of working with Professor Safa at the time on my undergraduate thesis. And through her, she connected me with the Grace Hopper Conference for Women in Computing. And set me up so I was able to attend. And it's a conference, huge conference with women in technology, amazing, incredible stories, fly women. So it was just like, wow, these are really, really awesome people that I would love to be around. And that's what solidified for me. I can do this as a profession, or I want to do this as a profession. And actually within that conference, that was the first time I learned the term imposter syndrome, because there was this big session on it and some of the women were sharing their experiences. And it was something that I had felt at UVA, but I never heard the term. And having that vocabulary is just so huge, because in that moment I was like, oh, okay, this is a thing, It's, I feel like I don't belong, but it's a thing that you feel when you're looking around and you're not seeing others like yourself as well. So yeah, I think those were the moments that stand out for me.
And I'm so glad that you had those moments and those experiences.
Exactly.
And the imposter syndrome, naming it really does help to not only just identify, but take reign over a feeling or a thought, or in your case, somewhat a hindrance,
Yeah. Being able to identify it and identify it with words, that goes a really, really long way.
Right.
And then just circling back to Huemon, that's another reason we want to share those stories, because sometimes somebody can explain a feeling that you're going through and haven't been able to get the vocabulary for. And just seeing that and learning that in that moment can be a huge weight off the shoulders. So, yeah.
Exactly. And I think this is also a good segue into letting those that are listening and hearing know that you are welcome to ask questions. If you put them in the chat, I will be able to read them as we continue with tonight's show. And I think that we'll have some good questions. I think that some things that you're even telling me now that I didn't know before prompt other questions and really want me to kind of dig into the things that have really helped create Huemon and who you are and where it's going. Mm-hmm. And you're very real. I saw some head nods in the audience about statistics. I will give a shout out. Thank you, Corey, for tutoring me in stats at UVA. Bless your soul. It was difficult, needless to say. So I empathize with you. Are there any individuals that you feel have really been pioneers, or maybe not individuals, but other companies that you really feel like are doing such a good job in keeping up with the trends that you somewhat either mirror your model with theirs or just learn from theirs? Because your platform is pretty unique, and I think it's very needed and especially with these times. I think your timing was impeccable.
Yeah. So platforms that come to mind, I would definitely say Shine, which is also in the wellness space, and a self-care app, also founded by two women who are amazing and women of color. So I think it's such an incredible model. And I think the conversation that happens there is opening up wellness and therapeutic spaces to more marginalized communities who haven't necessarily had that outlet, either if there's, cost barrier or even just like a cultural fit or stigmas that are still present in certain communities. I think that's been an awesome platform to kind of address those issues head on. And that's something just, again, rooted in my own background and personal experience that I've wanted to bring to and keep in the back of my mind as I'm building Huemon, is that how can this help fill the gap for certain communities who haven't necessarily had that access to therapeutic spaces. So I would say as a platform, that's one that I'm always like staying in tune with what they're doing and how they're growing and stuff. For individuals though, Brene Brown, that is just somebody, I think anyone who's seen her TED Talks and everything like that, just her discussion of radical vulnerability and the benefits that come from it. And yes, it's scary, but it's just so freeing when you get to live in that real truth of yours. So I love her message, and yeah, definitely something that inspires me as I'm building.
Yes, I will not pan around to my bookshelf, but I definitely have several of her books. And you're right, the words and the wisdom really help propel others that may not even be in the same field, but can definitely learn and take away from the messages and the truths, so to speak. I think that I would love to hear more about some of those communities that you mentioned before that you really want to continue to reach out to, but really kind of engulf yourself in making sure that they're okay, that they have a connection. I think I'll let you answer that before I ask my next question.
Definitely. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm most in tune through my own personal experiences with the Black community, but I've also met a lot of founders who are creating in this space who come from different communities of color. And a lot of these experiences that we go through that have an impact on our mental wellness, a lot of them can be tied to our identity or how others see us and treat us, either as individuals or through some of the larger systems in our nation and some of the experiences that we have that do boil down to how we look and who we are. And so I think it's important to recognize that there is some cause and effect there when it comes to mental wellness. And so creating a space with those communities in mind was just really important to me. And tying it back and sharing those personal experiences that they're going through that are causing either discomfort or pain, real pain at the time. And I think sharing those, and for somebody who's not as familiar with that experience, them getting that exposure and seeing it and seeing it from a personal standpoint and through a 1-minute story, I think that can go a long way in kind of changing some of our perceptions and opening us up to more diverse perspectives and insights.
Yeah. I think you mentioned something that kind of triggered a thought in my mind. Those individuals that not only see people like them, see stories, they're also hearing stories that are told from people that don't look like them. Do you feel as though your app is somewhat of a way to unify individuals in a way that maybe they hadn't been unified before or hadn't thought about those aspects of their own self, their own characteristics, their own features that mirror those of others that they wouldn't have thought about?
I think 100%, or that is my hope that that can help. And even through some of the videos that have been submitted and seeing them have definitely given me a moment where I'm like, oh, I never thought about it that way. I know specifically a question of what is your earliest memory of feeling like an outsider? And I think I had some of my own assumptions of who would answer that and how people would answer. But to see someone who submitted, who is a white male, and he talked about his experiences of feeling like an outsider and how, you know, others wouldn't perceive that necessarily just by looking at him. But he talked about kind of how it influenced him to become an anthropologist and everything. And it's just like, I think that's really powerful when you get to see those same experiences through someone else's lens, because I'm like, oh, okay, I could relate with you on that. And that helps me to see you in a different light and learn more about you as a person. So, yeah.
Yes. And it circles all the way back to what we said in the beginning of the name, Hue.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the unmasking of what you would see from just viewing someone, that initial 2 seconds that you have to create a thought, create a vision, understand who you think that person is. And your platform allows them to shake all of that, and people can tell you who they are. And I'm wondering, where do you want to go with this platform? I selfishly work in the education field, and I have thoughts about the use of something like this for education of children, as well as even adults in a professional development setting, or maybe a diversity, equity, and inclusion platform.
Yeah, I think there's a few different pathways I'm examining and seeing, you know, what's honest to the product and it pairs well with the experience that we want to create for the users. But I do see these personal anecdotes, these stories, as being really powerful in helping us with our own wellness and taking stock of that. But I think it bubbles up. I think all the systems that we have in place, the companies we work for, you know, anything that needs to bring people together, we're all coming together with these stories and with our experiences, as some of them shared, some of them not, but they all shape who we are. So how can, thinking, you know, long-term, how can we kind of leverage some of these anecdotes that really capture how we're feeling and how things impact us when it comes to things like research, or when it comes to training in diversity and inclusion broadly, and awareness. Sometimes, you know, we'll look at stats that a nonprofit releases, and it's, you know, the numbers tell one picture of things, but just hearing someone's personal story about how something affected them or something they went through can just make such a huge impact, the ways, you know, numbers and charts don't necessarily do. So yeah, long term, I would love to see how Huemon can play a role in all of that.
Yes. And you mentioned the word pairing, and I was going to ask about collaboration. So similar vein, are there any people that you would want to collaborate with or pair with and include in your vision?
I mean, I mentioned Brene Brown earlier, so
yes.
If you see this recording, if you're watching, Brene, call me. Definitely when it comes to like partnerships and collaborations, working with other organizations who are focused on this opening up of the wellness space. That's definitely who I want to align with and learn from and grow with, and how can we collaborate to help bring that solution to the forefront. And platforms or people who are working to kind of bring human nature back together through authenticity. And there are definitely a lot of platforms and tools that are trying to tackle that really huge problem. And definitely if people have watched like Social Dilemma, and if it's top of mind, like it's definitely something we're all thinking about, because unfortunately, as we've gone more digital and as we, you know, have more means to connect, there's been a lot more disconnection because of them. So how can we kind of solve that problem? Would love to work with people in that space.
That's good. And I love that you keep reiterating the solving the problem, because that's really the root of where I think tech in general comes to be. Is there's a problem, someone's going to solve it. Someone that has that math and computer science brain that I don't have, but thank God for you all. Magically, you guys figure it out. You're like, here's the app. Thank you.
A lot of it is still magic to me, I'll be honest. But yeah. It's fun to work with.
Well, you've definitely found different ways and strategies to do that. So I thank you. And you've mentioned a couple times these videos. And as someone that knows you and understands and is hearing the way you created this app, how did you feel when you made your first video?
Oh, great question. I love that. Well, I think like other people who are coming to it for the first time, there's a little apprehension. It feels a little weird, like talking to yourself and seeing yourself. But I think, one, it was a lot easier than I thought it would be, because you're really, reflecting and kind of, just letting it go. And two, it was kind of freeing to be able to unpack and share something. And you're not worried about that other end of how is it going to be received? Am I going to be interrupted? Or you're not putting on those extra filters that we sometimes do for processing what we're saying and how it's going to be received on the ears of others. And I think that can be, as I mentioned, very freeing because it lets you offload without that second guessing yourself, which I think is really powerful.
Yes, I definitely can understand that. And as someone that's created something, it was a burning question, so to speak, of when you first made your video and uploaded it, and we're looking at, this is what people are going to see, and how will others feel when they upload their videos. And I think that's a great point that you made, that you're giving you're giving a little bit of who you are to the world, but you're not going to be there on the other end to see and hear the reactions. So what's done is done, and you not only are okay, but you want to be okay with that.
Exactly. And we do allow people to, share what they want to share, and obviously keep private what they don't want to. But even just that self-reflection habit and having that video format, I think it's kind of cool to look back on some videos, especially if, you're kind of in a different place mentally, to just look back and reflect on that and see like, okay, I'll make it through that, or I'll be all right, and learn from it. I think it's really nice to watch. I think more so my feeling when I saw my first submitted video, I think was really cool. And it was, I believe, my dad when I was initially testing. And I think what was so cool is that even though this is somebody who I feel like I know really well, just the new stories or new things or reflections that came up, I think that was really awesome, to get a new side of a person that you're very close with. And I think that's another interesting aspect of the platform, that sometimes, because these conversations don't naturally come up in our day-to-day, you kind of tap into some stuff that hasn't been expressed otherwise, which is awesome.
Yes, and it allows you to maybe say some things that you wouldn't have said face-to-face, whether it be to someone else or even to yourself.
Exactly, yeah.
I know he is watching, so we will not call him out. Saved by the bell. Well, I definitely want to continue to open it up for anyone else. We've had a couple really good questions, and really get a good understanding and a foundation for what you've created, which I know I've mentioned before, but it's really timely. It's unique in a world where it's hard to be unique, in that tech realm. And it's also a way to create that connection with other people. And I definitely want to keep reiterating, it's a connection with others and for others. And I think that that's something that I definitely took away from not only dabbling and kind of looking through, but also hearing you. Do you think that the app itself is more focused on adults, or do you think it could be tailored toward maybe a younger crowd, or, like I said earlier, maybe used for educational purposes?
Yeah, so I definitely see it connecting with different people of varying ages. I think the video format, I would say that's something that Gen Z might be a little more comfortable with, in terms of like hopping on the camera, the kind of TikTok age and everything.
Probably more comfortable than we are.
Exactly. I'm always fumbling and like, oh, did I turn it around? Yeah. So I think that connects with them. But I think definitely when it comes to self-reflection, the more lived experiences you have and the more you can look back on some of them, I think it does connect well with maybe a little bit of an older generation that is kind of reliving some of these moments and processing. And so much awesome wisdom comes from those people who, you know, they've seen and learned a lot in their time. So how can we share some of those stories?
Yeah.
I think with my grandparents, one thing I always loved is just hearing those anecdotes and those stories that, you know, sometimes they would share over and over, but every time I would just love it because it really does, just seeing someone's eyes light up when they, you know, reflect on an experience. I think that's so cool, and it just brings you so much closer to them.
Yes, it does. It does. Those are irreplaceable stories, I think.
Yeah.
And you created a way that you can continue to have them and hang on to them. And we thank you. Thank you for that.
Definitely.
We have just a couple moments left, and I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to share anything that maybe I haven't asked, or something that maybe was a trigger for you that you wanted to make sure people know and hear about your app.
Yes. So a few things, definitely. I think you'll be sharing the link. So please visit, sign up for early access. And the big thing is that it's an iterative process, and we're learning and we're growing. And I love to hear feedback, and I love to chat with people specifically because I think there's so much I can learn and grow from there. And so I would definitely encourage people as we're starting off and taking off to help us really shape the product. Because I think that's where you learn best, when you talk to your actual users and get feedback from them. So yes, I'm excited about that. And yes, I would just encourage people. I think the startup world, or even just tech in general, can seem like such, as we mentioned earlier, magic or a mystery and everything like that. But I think what's really cool about that skill set is, going back to the solving problems, is that you can jump in and kind of try to put together a solution, a potential solution. Even if it doesn't work, you know, at the end of the day, you can at least start to kind of build something really tangible that you could share with others. And that's just such a fun and creative experience. And there's so many boot camps and so many ways to jump in, and a lot of platforms that are even outside of just code itself. And I think the space is better when we have more diversity and more different perspectives building for the problems they see in their real lives. So I would just encourage people to get out there and try things, try putting them together, and yeah, let's go solve some real problems.
Yes, solve some real problems. I love that. I love that ending too. And last question for you, and you didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
If there are those that I just got a message that want to get to know you, want to maybe collaborate with you, or even work for you, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Yes, definitely email. I think that is a great one. And so yes, we can share that as well. Okay, yeah. And if you sign up, you'll be getting some emails from me. So please just respond, and yeah, I would love to start that dialogue. I'm always looking for collaboration. So please do reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know I learned more than I thought I would, just from doing my own research and talking to you. And I want to thank you first and foremost for what you've created and what you've done for the tech industry, and really even just for the local people that are here in the DMV area. And I just want to thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. As a friend, I appreciate it.
Of course, and thank you so much again for having me. This has been great, and yeah, I really love the dialogue and conversation.
Thank you. And thank you for all those that were watching and listening and just staying engaged. I know that I am taking away a lot, and I hope that you all do as well. So thank you all for even just coming this evening.